Hello all, or not all yet, but hello some.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Amy, do you have stuff on unessays? Do you have resources? That's what we were talking about in our group.
Not like right in my hand or anything, but I'm sure folks
Somewhere?
have.
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah, they're, I think in the very long list of tabs that are open that I intended to read. It's getting out of control.
It's like every day. It's like every day.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite Americanists talk a lot about unessays on Twitter, like Kate Dahlstrand and LD Burnett. They're not classics people, but the ideas are similar.
Yeah, I think the places that I've seen there be discussions, I will look for some, do some Twitter search, because I think a lot of the good conversation I've seen have been Twitter threads. And
oh yeah, one of my graduate students, Natalie Chincata, did a presentation for the other grads about the unessay.
Oh, that would be one. If you don't mind putting me in touch with her, I could.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yay.
I unfortunately didn't get to see it because I was sick that day, but I was told it was very good, and knowing her, it's probably excellent.
Well, if we could find some way to sort of replicate that, if she has resources, or this also, by the way, for anyone who is interested in, like, because I kind of, people have cool things that have worked in classes or that they want to share or whatever, kind of creating a place to put all of those. I would say if anyone, I really like interviewing people, like if anyone just wants to chat about stuff, I would be happy to like record a short, like we could, I like being an interlocutor to hear about stuff that people are doing. So that is, if folks have stuff they want to specifically talk about, I would be happy to do that. And then we could have little short videos if you would rather not just do a video where you are talking, but you want to cover some stuff. Okay, so we had about 15 minutes left. I just wanted to have some more general discussion time. Are there things that came up in groups? Are there questions people want to talk to a larger group about? Are there issues that we seem not to have mentioned at all but seem important?
I just want to make a plea for people to think about students who have trouble differentiating color, color blindness, I guess, because it's often, we think about other visual impairments and hearing impairments and kind of these other big categories, and percentage-wise, you're pretty likely to have those students in your classes. And so just looking into, don't point at a map and say the areas in red are this and the areas in green are this. You can say the areas in red and polka dotted, the areas in green with diagonal lines, or same thing with text. You can say the words in red that are underlined or the words in green that are italicized. So I always try to have multiple markers like that because almost no students will self-identify, and they'll just sit there and try to figure it out. So.
Are you all familiar with, how many of you are using Canvas for your learning management? Anybody? A bunch of you. Our Canvas classes started to incorporate a program called You Do It. Is anybody familiar with that? It's UDOIT, and it's basically a software checker, and you can run your entire class through it, and it will tell you things like your color differentiations aren't strong enough for people who might be colorblind, or it might say the transcriptions aren't right, or there are no transcriptions for a video or something like that. It's out of UCF, I think, but it's called You Do It, and I have found it so helpful. It's galling how many errors keep showing up in my online classes, even though I keep thinking, I've done it now. It's perfect. But I would ask if that's something you can get, because I don't think it's very expensive.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there's some websites, Color Oracle, Andrew mentioned, Color Blindly. There's some places that if you don't, we use Blackboard, and it has a decent, when you upload materials, it will tell you, is this, like, are there things here that you need to improve? But it doesn't, I don't think it checks for color blindness. And so, yeah, I think that thinking about that is a really good thing, because yeah, a lot of times they're on slides, like a chart, and there are bars of colors that we might not think about. So no, that's a really good.
And it can be a universal design consideration too, because if they're printing it out and they don't have color in their printer, or if they're looking at it on their old computer and the color differentiation on their computer isn't good. So yeah, solving multiple problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. This is something that I was talking with, Suzanne gave some good advice and Alexis also gave some great advice. This is an issue that I've come up with in my teaching at the University of Chicago as a graduate student, is that a lot of times the faculty aren't on board, and I have to, go through what they say. They're the ones writing my letters. They have power over me in a lot of ways. And specifically with these things kind of being seen as like less rigorous, if you make accommodations, then somehow that's letting down the team of some kind of classics, or Chicago, I'm not sure. And so I guess the question is, what are some ways to sort of help the argument for this? I like Alexis kind of gave the help that maybe just like having these like actual studies, bringing them to them, but I'm not sure that is going to always be the best thing. But if there was some advice in actually incorporating these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a mix here of people who are supervising faculty members who might supervise grad students, and current and recent grad students here. Do people have, I know I was definitely in, Ellen, you remember being a grad student for faculty who very specifically, and I'll get you in 1 second, Greg, but we spent a lot of time in discussion sections having to kind of pick up the pieces from people who would make insensitive, off-color, offensive, kind of a range of things that would be said in lecture, and then needing to walk that fine line between not overtly undermining the professor in a way that could come back on us, but also making sure that our students don't think that X is okay. So yeah, I think that's a problem a lot of people have in one capacity or another tried to navigate. Greg.
So I was just going to say, a colleague of mine, a woman named Bethany Sawyer, did an excellent presentation on like, what does rigor actually mean? And if you go to like the US State Department's like definition of academic rigor, like so many of the things that we're told and that it sounds like, your colleagues at UChicago are pretending are rigor have nothing to do with what the actual definition of rigor is, right? Like rigor has to do with like, sustained mental engagement with things, but it doesn't have anything to do with like, can you memorize this list of things and spit it out or what, I mean, like, again, so like the thing that, what rigor actually means. So I'll share, I got to find the link. I was searching for it for this presentation. This presentation was specifically in the context of like using, active language versus like the traditional grammar translation, and how, according, to this woman's presentation and research, like actually, speaking Greek and Latin and that kind of stuff is much more rigorous than the traditional method based on what rigor is. But yeah, that rigor is largely just sort of gatekeeping. So I totally empathize, but maybe this will help you to have, again, like, hey, here's what the actual definition is according to the US government.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, this is more maybe a long-term project, but having published, like, I think people who are obsessed with rigor also defer to published scholarship, things. So like I think there are more people who are finding themselves in positions where scholarship on teaching and learning is accepted as like, I can publish as long as it's a peer-reviewed journal. I can publish in a pedagogy related journal and have it like count for tenure considerations. And so I think long-term having some resources that people can point to say like, look, here's an article in a journal, you love those things, as opposed to a Twitter thread or a blog post or, things where it shouldn't be the case. But I think that people tend to defer to those things as more credible than, me having an opinion and sharing it or whatever, or a blog post or something, which is a lot of times how we get out teaching information, because it's informal and it's not like, here's a thing I did. And it's not necessarily something we want to go through like a several month publication process and all of that. But I think getting some things in those kind of venues makes it easier for everyone else to to then have things they can point to and say, look, we know that actually doing this, this, and this improves language learning. So now I have something I can point to when my professor, or, you know, the supervising faculty member is saying, like, we do not grant extensions under any circumstances.
Right.
Having things you can point to.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, one of the things that I've gotten pushback on is that the graduate students who work for me, we encourage them to do a lot of group-based activities and collaborative stuff. And of course, the big challenge is going to be, let's do some collaborative stuff over Zoom, which I will say breakout rooms do seem to be like the best way to get people to collaborate. But there's sort of this idea that, and a lot of students have this idea as well, either because they've had a bad group project experience, because they, you know, because they're the ones getting graded at the end of the day, but there's, you know, this idea of you have to be able to do it individually. And so we're trying to push the idea of, no, look, if you create back planning and you have structure, then you can put people in groups and they will do the tasks that they need to do, which also have them doing whatever it is, doing the recall of facts or looking at notes or organizing information or reading a portion of their reading and summarizing it and then teaching it to someone in another group. Like all of these different kinds of things that are a different process, but they're still, you know, part of this process because, you know, you have students processing things in their own words. And so when I go back to classics and try to explain this to, say, my old advisor, there's, you know, pushback about like, it's all bells and whistles or, you know, so there's definitely going to be a little bit of that. But if you can get that stuff in there, with the Zoom, it can be a good way to get students. I mean, obviously you want to favor different types of personalities, like the extroverts like me are like, hey, I'm going to talk to the entire group. But, you know, having some things that favor the extroverts, talking in small groups, some of things favoring the introverts of having little writing activities can be some good ways to have quote unquote rigor and have students actually working with the material. And that's my thing for group work.
Excellent. We have like 4 minutes left. So if there are people who haven't had a chance to talk that want to talk, Greg, your hand is still up. I don't know if that's intentional or you forgot.
No. I forgot to put it down. Sorry.
Jessica, did you want to talk about stuff or do you want to share? I mean, if you could send me a link or something for, because I sort of asked in the chat if people have cool how they have structured group work instead of like, here's 4 people, just go make a thing.
I can describe it. I don't have my USB stick, so I can't shoot off the project description, but the performance group activity that I give my drama class, you know, they all have to do one scene from whatever play we're reading at the time. And I have them perform it after everybody's read it and we've discussed it. And I try not to discuss the passage that they've chosen. So they have to pick it before we discuss it. So I let them interpret it for us. But it involves some sort of costuming, or they could focus on how they stage it. They have to wear the masks. It's an ancient drama class. But I have them do peer review and self review. And so I have them write about what other people have contributed to their scene and what they contributed and how they feel about it and what they learned about the play after performing it. And they do a talk back with the class, which they're also graded on. So I give them 3 grades. One is the performance and the talk back. The other is the preparation, right? So those are 2 group grades, and then I give individual grades based on all the feedback I got. And they almost always get A's because, you know, it's a lot of work and it freaks them out, but they also have a lot of fun. So I think that the self-assessment and peer review is really crucial because it makes them think about it as they're working as a group because they know they have to do it.
Yeah, I love the idea of having that kind of built in, kind of the self and peer assessment. I had students lead discussion one class session, and they did a self assessment afterwards, and and having qualitative assessments as opposed to like give a grade to this, but like tell me what went well and what didn't go well, and getting students to dig into that, which I thought was really valuable. Ellen, you keep looking like you're about to say something.
Oh, I just had a kind of a thought that is not about this, but about everything we've talked about in general, and also is a little bit of a response to Jordan's question, which is mostly that there are some things we can't fix, right? There are some things that we can't respond to every need, whether because it's a big systemic problem or it's because we don't have the power to do it. But I think the main, and I think to some degree that's something we have to kind of let go of, that we can try to advocate for our students in the best way that we can. We can try to give them the most equitable class that we can. But sometimes it's going to be, the accommodation students need, or sometimes it's going to be beyond our power, right? To make the class perfectly equitable. So while I think I would always advocate pushing back on faculty with whom you disagree, I got in a lot of trouble. Maybe not as much as I did, but I think also it's worth keeping in mind that there's always going to be situations in which we can't fix every problem. So, and that's one of the things that I feel like I struggle with a lot. But that's why I like this approach, this UDL approach, right? To think through, that's how I'm coming at the class from the beginning, right? That's my frame of mind. And I let students know that. It tends to help that along the way, rather than putting, I guess, all of the burden on me to try to fix everything all the time. I don't know. I lost my train of thought in there somewhere, but I think it kind of made sense. I don't know.
So we are at time. Unfortunately, as we have reiterated after every group breakout session, there's like not enough time. But I would encourage people to keep chatting. I don't want anyone to feel like they need to stick around after time is up. We are done. It has been a lovely 90 minutes spent with everybody. But I would like us to keep these conversations going. And if you have things that you want to share, I'll send the link out again. But if there are things that I think a lot of us have some like really thoughtful syllabus language and thoughtful assessment like assignments that we've come up with. And I know a lot of us are friends on the internet who have been able to see, as somebody mentioned, Minai mentioned, being able to see people develop kind of that from beginning to end of asking collaborator, like, hey, people, what could I do for this? And then watching these things develop. I have been meaning to do something. I don't want to just put the full chat transcript up somewhere because it seems like that might be weird, but going through and compiling all of the links that people have been sharing in chat is a thing that I will figure out the best way to do that, because there's a ton of good resources that are shared in the chat every week. So without further ado, let's shut it down here, but I will see everybody next week. Continue conversations in all of the forums it's mostly Discord, but also wherever else you want to do it, and have a great week.